Well, this is one of those episodes I look forward to because it's the episodes where I talk to you, responding to listener questions. And before we get into them, let me remind you, send your questions in to questions@russellmoore.com about anything. Yeah, it could be about church, Bible, theology, maybe an issue you're wrestling with about a relationship or family or work or whatever it is. Send it to us at questions@russellmoore.com, and extra points if you send it in a voice memo where I can actually hear your voice. There's a lot that comes through in the human voice that just doesn't in printed text. Lots of nuance and everything else. So please do that for us at questions@russellmoore.com. And we have with us our producer, Leslie Thompson, who has the listener questions for me. Leslie, do we have questions today?
We do. We've got one question that we're going to tackle, and this is about how to engage with our atheist friends.
Okay.
Very interested to hear your thoughts on this. So, listener says, I've deeply appreciated the friendship you have with Jonathan Rauch and the way you've been able to foster a relationship despite the opposing views you each share. In my own community, there's a gathering hosted by atheists that invites Christians in conversation around particular topics of concern. I'd like to follow your lead, but I'm insecure that I am not prepared or capable enough to engage well. So, how would you encourage a Christian to attend such a gathering? Would you encourage them? What posture should I take to be involved? How can I look to foster the same kind of relationship while also caring about the salvation of my new friends? Such a great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think one of the things that has made this difficult for people is YouTube. And the predecessors to YouTube, because there will often be these Christian atheist dialogues end up being debates where someone comes in and has all of their talking points and arguments, and they argue about these issues. I wouldn't, if I were invited to go to an atheist Christian dialogue like she's talking about, I wouldn't go. And here's why. It's because that's not my that's not my particular calling or gift set to have theatrical sorts of debates. That's just not. I mean, that takes a certain um, kind of enjoyment of that kind of cage matchy sort of and that's not my interest. It also, I think, is almost always really ineffective. So if you look at the instances where you have that kind of a Christian gathering of unbelievers around sort of approach. You can see a few of those. Paul at Mars Hill, uh, Jesus, sometimes not with unbelievers, but with the religious leaders. But those are always kind of forced providentially in the sense that it's not, Paul's not going into Athens saying, I want to be questioned at Mars Hill. He's simply talking about what he believes. He's preaching Jesus and the resurrection, and then he's called in. Now, when it comes to friendship, particularly, I mean, with John Roush and I are not friends because uh, he's trying to convince me to be an atheist or I'm trying to convince him to be a Christian. I mean, obviously, I would love for him to become a Christian. And one of the things that's good about our conversations is, number one, that nobody's kind of dancing around or holding back on what we actually believe, but we're not talking about those things in front of an audience, and that's good because it enables us to have a genuine sort of conversation. And the same was true. I mean, Tim Keller was in our friend group, and he was the same way. Who, we can talk about if you're in sort of a public kind of debate setting, what you want to do is to identify the weakest points of your opponent's viewpoint that you already know how to demolish. and you're going to find those. An actual friendship, though, is not that way. I mean, most of the time, what you're talking about are things that are really not about your disagreements as much as they are about your points of contact. And then when you do talk about your disagreements, it's there's an ability to not be self-protective or to be antagonistic, but to actually have a real conversation. And I found that's genuinely how. So you can have uh, you can have moments where you say, I don't know how I would respond necessarily to that critique of my viewpoint right now. John has said before, is I feel sometimes like I'm colorblind, that you all can see spectrums of color that I can't see in terms of faith. Well, if we were having a debate, if he were Richard Dawkins or something, he wouldn't concede that point. You wouldn't. I mean, but in a conversation, it's not a point, and it's not being conceded. And when I say, the problem of evil is a genuine problem that we don't have a syllogistic answer to, and it's something that all Christians who genuinely think about this wrestle with and try to figure out how it fits together. Well, you're not going to say that if you're in a debating context.
Right. It's a weak point in your own argument that you're
Yeah,
not going to
and that's
expose.
how you actually you you trust each other, because you do know that you're not a project for each other. So I think there's a time for just you know, I don't know you. Here I am. Let me tell you what I believe. There's a time for that. And we see that a lot. There's also a time for a genuine kind of friendship that doesn't hold anything back, because you're able to have a level of trust. And that means that you don't have either some of this kind of this fake combativeness or this fake politeness. I mean, for instance, the other day, john John brings up, um, because he'd read this article about red heifers, and people who these are Christians and certain kind of Jews who are trying to cultivate red heifers in order to have sacrifice so that the temple can be rebuilt, and this whole
You're talking
prophecy
about the
chart.
cow?
Yeah,
A very specific type of cow. Okay. The red
yeah,
heifer. Okay.
yeah. Because the Levitical code requiring red heifer to purify the
Yes. Okay. You're
sacred space,
being
and so
literal.
they're trying to
Okay.
do that
Mm-hmm.
in order to rebuild the temple. And John was just like, "Are you familiar with this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you realize how crazy some of the things are that you all believe?" I said, "Well, it's not you all believe." I said, "John, this is a fringe of 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 all of Christianity, even just of all the Christians who are living now." I said, "So that's kind of like if I were to say, what about you people and your Baphomet Satan statues in the Iowa state?" I mean,
Right.
you would say, that's not me. That's a bunch of idiots. I said, so I mean, but the only way we can have that kind of conversation is because he knows I'm not a brand ambassador. I'm quite willing to talk about the genuine problems we have in evangelicalism. And he's not a brand ambassador. He's been very willing to talk about sort of a secularist attempt to restrict freedom of speech and freedom of religion, all those sorts of things. So it's a genuine kind of friendship. I would say, if I were this listener, um, I would I would kind of spend some time thinking about, what is this gathering actually trying to do, and are they carefully thinking it through? So it might be that what you have are a group of atheists who are saying, "Hey, we're really curious about Christianity because, and I've had atheist friends who have done this, who have said, look, um, I had a student one time, a very secular student, a secular university, who said, "Look, I'm not a believer, but my parents are, and I don't know anything about it, and I'd like to know whether I might accidentally offend them with something I say.
Hmm.
And so, can you help me kind of
Yeah.
figure out what their vantage point is?" Well, if that's what you have going on, and you have people who are curious about this, they want to have a conversation, or if you're saying, I'm trying to understand people who don't believe in God. How do they think? How do they? Okay, well, then you can have a genuine sort of conversation. But sometimes what you want, sometimes what people want is either to kind of sort of get out all their frustrations. You become the scapegoat
Right. Yeah.
Christian, or vice versa, the scapegoat unbeliever that they can sort of vent to. That's not productive. And so, or kind of a, we're going to prove that we're intellectually superior to you. That's not productive. And it also can give you this sense, I think, sometimes that bearing witness to the gospel means being an expert on everything, when that's not what Jesus sent us out to do. A sower sows the seed. The farmer sows the seed, goes to sleep, and the seed grows. He knows not how. So it just doesn't usually happen with, aha, I've destroyed your argument from the problem of evil.
Mm-hmm.
It normally happens with people who um, people who over a long period of time start reflecting on something that they start to see that they need, or Jesus would put it, hungering and thirsting, and then they start seeking you will find, and they find that that happens usually over a very long period of time. It doesn't happen in a debate. So I would say it's productive to have kind of conversations with, here's my Christian point of view, here's my atheist point of view in some cases. But if what you're wanting is actual friendship, then that's a different sort of thing. I mean, John and I, a group of us, get together every week. Um, we talk about all kinds of stuff. I mean, we're talking yesterday about starvation and how to deal with kids who are starving in Gaza and elsewhere. You know, we talk about kind of family members and people with cancer and those kinds of things, and then we'll talk about, I will say, John, how do you think about death, if what you think, and he will ask me, how do you deal with, in your mind, suffering when you believe that there's a good and all powerful God? But it's not like, aha.
It's a relationship. It's
It's a
relationship based.
relationship that's
Mm-hmm.
that's genuinely sort of trying to get behind the kind of caricatures. And that brings with it a certain kind of trust, and that brings with it a certain kind of, we're able to good naturedly kid each other uh, without being insulted by that kind of thing. That just takes a long period of time. So I think that if you are thinking that, like with, and John is one of many atheist friends that I have, but in none of those cases did I initiate conversation with them because they were atheists.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't think
Yeah.
they initiate conversation with me because I'm a Christian.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you say the thing about being a brand ambassador or
Hmm.
having to defend. I think there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with a relationship with people who see differently from
Yeah.
you. I just had a situation yesterday where a friend of mine, we don't actually know each other that well, but he will send me these reels without context. and it's topics that are kind of, the real will say, I'm a Bible scholar, and the more I read the Bible, the more liberal Jesus seems, the more I study it. Things of that,
Hmm.
and he'll present it without context.
Hmm.
And I was in a particularly tired moment yesterday, and I just responded. I said, I'm sorry if I sound short with you. I don't mean to. But can you tell me what you're looking for when you send these things? Because I value our relationship, but I don't also want to defend. I don't want to constantly be in a place of defense. Are you looking for information? And in that vulnerability, in that sort of laying down of arms almost, he was able to say, well, no, I see you as a curious person. We come from very similar evangelical upbringings. He's struggling very much with the faith. I think he's basically left. So I don't know that I would classify him as an atheist. I don't know. But um, in that vulnerability and the laying down of arms, I was able to really figure out what's he looking for. He's just looking for conversation.
Yeah.
And so we were able to engage on that level rather than me feeling like I needed to defend uh,
Right.
these things that I have no business defending. I have an
Right.
insecurity in them.
Yeah, and because if when you do that, if you, I mean, you're going to do a couple things. I mean, either if somebody thinks I have to defend everything that goes under the name of Christian,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a lot of times we do that because, I mean, there are times when I've been frustrated when we have groups of Christians and atheists there, where we're having conversations, and sometimes there will be things about really dark, difficult things that are going on within the church. We talk about
Mm.
here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at first, sometimes I'll get angry in my mind. I don't seem like it, but I get angry in my mind and say, "Why are you bringing that up in front of these atheists when that's a?" So it's almost like we've got our family problems, and you don't
Right.
bring that out
Right.
into. But then I have
Yeah.
to realize, wait, that's not that's just not how Jesus operates, because um, he's not he's not marketing something. He's bearing witness to something that is true, and part of what he said is true is that the church would be this way. And so sometimes, all the times, I have to get myself out of that. Wait a minute, we're not here on firing line. When we're in a conversation, we're genuinely having conversation. And what I have found is that over time, I mean, I have another friend who is kind of a very secular. He's from a different world religion background, but very secular person. And I kind of noticed that our friendship had moved into a different level when he would say to me, "Man, these," and we started talking about kind of some situations on his own side, that were difficult, and I could do the same without thinking, "Oh, we're as you put it, laying down arms," because at that point, whereas we're not fighting each other. Um, we're genuinely having a conversation, and I think um, that mentality actually is a hindrance to the gospel, because what happens is then you think, okay, well, we can't. I mean, if you look at, for instance, what Paul is doing in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, we renounce cunning and peddling of the word of God. So he acknowledges all that's going on within the church. We renounce that, and we declare to you the light that is broken forth in the face of Jesus Christ, the light of the glory of God that's broken through in the face of Jesus Christ. Both of those things are there. Well, where's that coming from? That's coming from a place of confidence, because Paul knows, I encountered this person on the road to Syria, and I know this is true. And so I'm not having to spin anything, because I know this is true. When you have that level of confidence, then that brings with it a freedom from this sort of, okay, I have to make sure all my talking points are in order so that people don't find out that that we have. problems. I mean, usually what happens when I have unbelieving friends who will bring up kind of the mess within the church, usually I will say, yeah, and you don't even know how bad it is because you ought to read Revelation 1 through 3. There's
Yeah, right.
nothing critical you can say that is in any way
Yeah,
more
that isn't
critical than what
known.
Jesus
Right.
himself is saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That has to come from a place of confidence in what you believe.
Well, I also hear that the role of being threatened seems to be present here too. Is that a true
Yeah.
confidence isn't threatened, whereas feeling threatened has a sense of wanting to defend.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is I think there are a lot of Christians who, for whatever reason, feel sometimes you'll have a believer and an unbeliever that are both really defensive because they're feeling inferior. The Christian's feeling intellectually inferior and the unbeliever's feeling morally inferior. Neither
Yes.
would say that,
Hmm.
but that's both kind of the posture that they're coming from. And so the Christian is feeling like I've got to prove to you that I'm really smart enough to have this conversation. And the atheist is saying, I have to prove to you that I'm really good enough to have this conversation.
Wow. Yeah.
And then it's not a conversation because they're not talking to the other person, they're talking to themselves and trying to convince themselves that I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, whatever. That's not an actual sort of conversation, much less for the Christian is it a bearing of witness. And that's that's necessary to that kind of conversation.
Yeah. That's a good word. Thanks for that.
Well, it's a good question, wasn't it, Leslie? I think
Such a good question.
I would just encourage people to send whatever question you have about anything to questions@russellmoore.com. Send it in a voice memo. We'll take it if it's not, but I'd like to hear it. And we will see you all next time.